Most people think men are failing. They look around and see guys who are checked out, unmotivated, emotionally unavailable. And the conclusion they reach is, something is wrong with men. Here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to say out loud. A man doesn't walk away from the table because he's losing. He walks away when he figures out the game is rigged. Men aren't collapsing, they're disconnecting. And when an entire generation of men quietly disconnects, you don't feel it immediately. You feel it 10 years later, when the damage is already done and the bill is already due. That bill, it's arriving right now. Today, we're going to break this down in 2 parts. First, the psychology. What actually happened inside the male mind over the last decade and why it was completely rational. Not toxic, not fragile, rational. Second, the social consequence. What society is only now beginning to notice and why it's so much harder to fix than anyone anticipated. Stay with me through part 1 because if you skip it, part 2 makes no sense. And part 2 is where it gets really interesting. Here's where it started. And I want to be precise because this distinction matters enormously. For years, legitimate criticism of certain behaviors, which is healthy, which every civilization needs, slowly transformed into a permanent suspicion of masculinity itself. Those are not the same thing, not even close. Correcting bad behavior strengthens a society. Treating an entire group as a default suspect, that weakens it. And the messaging didn't arrive in one dramatic speech. It came in 1,000 small doses. The bumbling dad in every sitcom. The husband who's the punchline in every ad. The man whose first job, apparently, was to justify his existence before he earned the right to speak. Repeated 1,000,000 times, those messages built a narrative. Simple, quiet, pervasive. If you are a man, you are probably the problem. And here's what most people still don't understand about how men respond to that. They didn't riot. They didn't write manifestos. They didn't even argue. They went quiet. Because male silence rarely means surrender. It usually means observation. And while some people were celebrating each new round of collective criticism, millions of men were making a very private calculation. They stopped seeking approval, stopped chasing social validation, stopped believing that participation would give them anything worth having in return. The Stoics warned about exactly this, by the way. No human being can sustain indefinite energy investment into a system they perceive as hostile. You can comply for a while, you can tolerate for a while, but eventually, one question becomes unavoidable. Why keep investing where you're treated as a problem to be managed? When that question takes root, everything changes. Now here's where it gets psychologically fascinating, because what developed wasn't anger. Anger, at least, still wants something to change. What developed was something far more difficult to reverse. When showing your authentic identity consistently produces social punishment, the human brain does something elegant and devastating. It stops showing it. You don't fight. You don't defend. You don't disappear dramatically. A part of you simply retreats. The man starts measuring every word, analyzing conversations before he speaks, hiding opinions he used to share naturally, not because he's afraid, but because he learned that sincerity has a cost. And when authenticity carries a constant cost, emotional reserve becomes a survival strategy. Then comes the exhaustion, not physical exhaustion, psychological exhaustion. The specific fatigue of feeling permanently evaluated before you even open your mouth. A man can work 12-hour days and feel energized, but very few human beings can sustain years of feeling like they're on trial simply for existing. Eventually, The brain does what any efficient system does under sustained stress. It reduces investment, less emotional exposure, less trust extended, less hope placed in outcomes. And then the shift nobody predicted: cynicism. But here's what everyone gets wrong about cynicism. It doesn't come from hatred, it comes from repeated disappointment, from expectations running into the same wall again and again, until the mind simply stops expecting. So men didn't become more aggressive, they became more indifferent. And indifference is catastrophically harder to detect than anger. The indifferent man still smiles, still shows up, still functions, but he's no longer giving the same part of himself. The light's still on, but nobody's home in the same way anymore. This is where the personal story becomes a civilizational one. For decades, societies operated on a silent assumption so obvious that nobody bothered to question it. Men would always pursue. Men would always compete for relationships. Men would always absorb the risk of rejection, keep showing up, keep building families, keep investing in something beyond themselves. It was treated as a law of nature. Turns out it was an incentive structure. And incentive structures, when corrupted, collapse. What we are watching right now is not a crisis of masculinity. It is a crisis of psychological incentive. Human beings do not keep participating indefinitely in systems they perceive as imbalanced. They adjust their behavior, quietly, individually, in private rooms with no announcement and no audience. One man deleted the dating apps and put that energy into his business. Another discovered that the peace of his own routine was worth more than the constant emotional uncertainty of modern relationships. Another simply stopped pursuing. And when millions of men make similar decisions at roughly the same time, statistics start registering something strange a few years later. Marriage rates fall, birth rates drop, relationships become less frequent, less committed, less durable. But here's the key insight most analysts miss. Those numbers are just the shadow. The real event happened earlier, inside the mind. Because every great social transformation begins as an invisible psychological one. The question nobody wants to ask, the one that actually matters, is not, where did the committed men go? The question is, what did an entire generation of men see that made withdrawing feel safer than staying? That question, more than any statistic, deserves our full attention. Because a civilization can survive economic downturns. It can survive political instability. What it cannot sustain indefinitely is a situation where the two groups who must build it together begin to imagine their futures as separate projects. Trust, once eroded at scale, does not return through subsidies or ad campaigns. It returns only when both sides begin to see each other as potential allies again, rather than potential threats. That is the real challenge. And we are not there yet. Now, if you're one of those men who has spent years carrying contradictions, absorbing messages designed to make you doubt who you are, listen carefully. Don't turn your experience into resentment. Resentment is a prison disguised as protection. Don't let what disappointed you define what you become. Build your mind. Build your discipline. Build your character. Build a life so solid it doesn't depend on the approval of confused people or the direction of temporary cultural winds. Because here's the most uncomfortable truth of all. The recognition you're waiting for may never arrive. There may never be a collective apology. History rarely works that way. But a wise man understands something others learn too late. Validation is not justice. Justice is being able to look in the mirror and know you didn't let the world's noise corrupt what you are. Because when the time comes to rebuild what is slowly being lost, and it will come. It won't be the loudest voices who lead that process. It will be the ones who stayed steady, the ones who kept constructing themselves when nobody was watching. So the question isn't what society owes you. The question is far more serious than that. When all of this noise is over, will you have become the man who deserved to exist from the beginning? That verdict won't be handed down by culture, not by history, not by anyone else. It'll be handed down by you, and that's the only one you can never escape. If this landed differently than you expected, subscribe. I put out frameworks like this every week for men who are done being spectators in their own lives. And if you want to understand how to rebuild your psychological foundation from the ground up, the next video is already waiting for you.